I'd like to thank Thelonious Monk for that inspired church music. So, why did Jesus turn over the tables? Okay. Here we are at the beginning of Holy Week, the high holidays of the Christian church, just like Jesus was in town for Passover, the high holidays of the Jewish church. And Holy Week calls us to review, even to celebrate, the two most important events that define Christianity as something special: the crucifixion and the resurrection. But it's the turning over the tables is what sets this whole drama, ignites this whole drama, and sets it in motion. So why did he do it? And what does it mean for us here today? Well, it's always said, the main interpretation is, well, he did it to point out to people the injustice of the system. So for once, let's just take a step back and look at the context of this. And sometimes we today have to be told things that everybody in those days would know. His family, every family in the countryside, starts maybe a week before. You've got to set up your whole system to be sure the plants, crops are watered and the animals are fed. And then you travel, if you're from his area, Nazareth, let's say, that's 3 days down to Jerusalem. Tired, dusty, you get a meal, a night's lodging, and the next day you go up to the temple to celebrate. You go up the southern steps into this big plaza. It's like a Costco parking lot. It's big, only it's got trees. It's nice. And then you go over to the money changers because you have to change your Roman coins for shekels. It's got a picture of Caesar on it, graven image, can't use that. Then you go over to the bird cage. If you're poor, and 95% of the people are poor. If you're rich, you bring a calf. But if you're poor, you get a couple doves. And of course, you can't bring your own doves because they might be blemished. But fortunately, we have unblemished doves right here. Step right this way. You get your doves, you go up to the door, and the bouncer says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I think that one's got a little blemish right there." So you have to go back and get another dove. This dove, by the way, costs you a day's wages because there's a little markup, like 200%, 300% from what you would pay in Nazareth. But what are you going to do? And you go in, you celebrate Passover, come back out, get a meal, night's lodging, and you go back to Jerusalem, to Nazareth. Add it all up, you put it in today's dollars, it's about $5,000. There's the sacrifice, not the little bird, it's the whole thing. And you do it because you're required. It's not, gee, I hope to see you on Easter, that would be nice. No, you're required. Okay. Now there's a larger context. Jerusalem at that time is about 100,000 people. We're told by Josephus, Jewish historian, that during the holy days, the tourists, the travelers, the pilgrims and worshipers that came in were 250,000. This is their Super Bowl times 5. It amounts to a huge transfer of wealth from poor to merchants and the priesthood, from rural to urban. Okay. Now, I just ask you, you have common sense. Now that you know what everyone knew, would you need a Jesus to point out to you that this is unjust? I don't think that's why he did it. In fact, this marketplace was called the marketplace of the family of Annas. Annas was, we know him as Ananias, but he's the priest in charge of the area, the person to whom Jesus was taken before he went to Pontius Pilate. And they mention the family because it's a hereditary office. He had 5 sons, every one of them became the priest of this concession. It's a concession. This is how they make their living. You have land, we have a marketplace. So I think they knew it was unjust. Now, let's look at a more political interpretation. He creates a scene, and it's a public scene, it's a symbolic political act. Because he's functioning as an organizer. And really, in any situation, any society, there's really 2 kinds of power. Let's make it simple. There's money and there's people. You're only powerful when it's organized. Well, money's always organized. It's a medium of exchange, and it's ruled by institutions. Even you have the military or police. Now, that's power, but you have to pay them. No food, no shoot, okay? People are only powerful when they're organized. So what does an organizer do? Defines the situation. I hate this thing. I want to move back. Defines the situation and draws a line and says you're on one side or the other. And that's what Mario Savio did on Sproul Hall steps. The first part of his speech was defining the situation, and then Gina read the part, much like Mario said it, with passion, with indignation, with outrage, with anguish, and a call to action, which is how you could look at the mood, the tone, and the effect of what Jesus did. That's what organizers do. I know because I was there. I was about, from me to Gina, about, 10 yards away. And it was not announced that this is what was going to happen. He gives his speech and people start streaming into Sproul Hall. There was a crowd, and I felt called, but I felt confused. I was in engineering at the time. I didn't know history. I didn't know politics. I knew nothing. I'm from Orange County, bastion of conservatism and ignorance, but I was moved. So I'm holding my little used copy of The Rebel by Camus, hoping I would find the answer in there. I'm literally, I don't know what to do. And I remember 2 things that he said. By the stand you take, or by your failure to take a stand, you too shall enter the fray. There's no bleachers here. There's no neutral ground. You can't wait and say, like the professor, this was during the war, Vietnam War, and the professors were all saying, well, not all of the evidence is in yet. We can't take a stand. And after a while, I'm kind of getting, I got you. All of the evidence will never be in, so you don't have to do anything. That's their stand. So the other thing that Camus said was, if you're not against the rule of law in general, you need to take care to only break the law. Civil disobedience is necessary, but only break those laws with which you disagree. Well, that's all I needed because I said, well, I don't know. It seems like an administrator has a reasonable right to prevent or prosecute unlawful entry. So I didn't go in. It had a certain moral purity to it that I liked. But I never felt good about it. I never felt good about it. But I didn't want to go in because other people were going in. I didn't want to go in because some guy is saying I should go in. But 3 years later, by that time, I changed my mind. Because I learned, you don't always have the option to break that law that you disagree with. That's not practical. Those people were, I knew a lot of them, and they were pretty worried. And the most common worry was, this was only 5 years after the HUAC, the House Un-American Activities Committee hearings in San Francisco, with the oath controversy, where the faculty were called to take this oath. And those that refused were blackballed. They might have lost their jobs. And these students in Sproul Hall were the better students, and half of them were graduate students. They had great careers that they could really count on, but they were afraid that they would lose that. This was the first sit-in. You kind of have to remember, this hadn't been done before. We've had sit-ins in the summer at lunch counters, but this was at a major university, taking over the administration building. We didn't know what was going to happen. So we had the same situation at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, October 1967. The same weather, it was cold, it was overcast, and we were going to sit in, and I won't go into all of the details of the action, but basically it was their first sit-in. And I was in the planning meetings, Students for Democratic Society, and I was talking about how important it is to cross the line, and my mind had changed about this, and I did sit in. And I was there, people were clubbed, people were arrested, but it felt right. It felt right to me. And after that, I was on the Stewards Council of the first union of academic staff, the Teaching Assistants Association, and I was the overall coordinator for nonviolence training for civil disobedience at Diablo Canyon. And I'm glad I did those things. I am glad. I wouldn't do them now because I changed my mind again. Because I saw that, an organizer is a Democrat, a true Democrat, small d, who believes once you get the people behind you, there's no stopping you, which I still believe. I think that's true. But if your model is to overthrow a power structure, and then you come in and replace it with another power structure, you've got all the same problems. It's just that now they're your problems. That's one problem with it. Think of, the Bolshevik Revolution, then you've got Lenin and Stalin. Think of the Long March, Mao Zedong, and then you've got the Cultural Revolution, or Xi. Or anyone. Cuba, sometimes you can even improve things, makes it a lot better, but you do have the same problems. Once you pick up the gun, how do you put it down? But it's the second problem that affected me more, touched me more. And that is, what's the role of the people? Well, we're the movement. We have to be part of the movement, and we're going to take these actions for the benefit of some future generation. Meanwhile, we sacrifice our careers, we neglect our relationships and our families. What's liberating about that? And secondly, it does not address the suffering of a unique individual. Psychological, emotional, spiritual. And I think that any revolution that does not address the suffering of a unique people, of us, well, that's no revolution at all. So I don't think Jesus did this action as an organizer. It's certainly not how he lived his life. He went around the country and was not organizing. People came to him. He was reactive. He responded to their suffering and their faith. And that's how miracles happened. I'll tell you, I think he did it because he had to. He didn't really have a choice. He knew before it was said in the text, he was going to die. I mean, if you're a healthy person, you don't have cancer, and you don't think you'll get into an accident, he knew he was going to be killed. He's going to be murdered. Just like Martin Luther King in his last speech. Remember, Polly played the speech in Memphis, also in April, that God has shown me the mountaintop, and I have seen the promised land, and I may not get there with you, but I tell you, we will all get to the promised land. He knew he was going to die. There's something about being spiritually clear, seeing the world the way it is, that you can see the forces arrayed against you. And he didn't know when, he didn't know how, he didn't know who, he just knew it was going to happen. And in less than a day, he was dead. Okay, Jesus knew this. But there's something about facing the certainty of that death that clarifies your priorities. So I think this was Jesus's last miracle, and in an interesting way, it mirrors his first miracle in Mark, also in a synagogue, where a man comes to him possessed by demons, and Jesus casts them out. And in the course of his journey, maybe influenced by the March of Palms and his entry into the town, which he did not organize. There were people who would have liked to, the zealots, but he did not. But in this action, he changed from being reactive to being proactive. He changed from casting the demon out from an individual to casting the demonic out of the whole religious institution and the state, the whole way it was doing its business, and saying, we are not going to do business as usual because there's more important business that needs to be taken care of. He said, you have made this a den of thieves. Who's the you? Well, here's the den of thieves. Who's the you? Ananias. That's the you, and also the you is also the people, because they all participated in business as usual. And that's all that elites need. You may not like it. You can grumble. Go ahead and protest. Be my guest. But do it. And if you do it, that's all they need for the system to endure and to continue. Jesus put a stop to that in his own way. He did what he had to do. He couldn't leave this earth without addressing the institutional sources of all this individual suffering, the norms of society, the whole thing. It was a radical, revolutionary act. So for us today, there's lines everywhere. You may notice them, you may not. There was a line when you crossed the threshold coming into the sanctuary. You made a choice. I'm not going to be out there. I'm going to be in here. That was your choice. No one made you do that. We'll accept, you'd be friends either way, Some people crossed a line coming up to an altar, coming up to be blessed. That was a choice. So I want to be really clear about this. This is not a matter of right or wrong. This is not a matter of what's socially acceptable or not, or doing something because it looks good. It doesn't matter which side that you're on of these lines. What matters is your own integrity. What are you called to do? What's meaningful to you? Why are you doing it? What are your motives? What are your goals? It's up to you. And that's why Jesus did not necessarily make people do things or say they should. He never said that. He just did who he was, what he stood for. Here I stand. I can do no other. That kind of stance does have a lot of power in it. One man does it, we get a Protestant Reformation. Who knows what will happen? I don't think Jesus knew what was going to happen. I think he knew he was going to be punished for this, and it was no surprise that he'd be crucified. But everything after that, who knows? Because it's not up to him. It's up to us to make that happen or not. So this choice is available all the time, every day. It's not about setting yourself on fire in Civic Center Plaza, it's not necessarily about just a random act of kindness. It's about what goes on inside, your clarity, your sense of either integration and calling on one side, or on the other side, hesitation, confusion, just doing what's pleasurable or entertaining to help pass the time. All of these things. Think about what you do and why and how much consciousness you have about it, and how's that working for you. I think that's what Jesus inspires me to do by the action. And never underestimate that you're too small to make a difference. Let's not hide our light under a bushel. Turn over the tables. The word for table, I have to say, in Hebrew, it's the same word as the word for bank. And why don't we say the reading is, Jesus turned the banks over in the marketplace? That would have a little punch to it. So I think that's a good place to stop. Amen. Okay. Yeah, don't hesitate. Don't all talk at once.
Well, I think it's good that you reminded us that we're always crossing lines, potentially.